Hello, welcome to the session. We'll just allow a minute for everyone to arrive and then we'll begin. Warm welcome if you've already joined us. I can see some delegates are still arriving, so Alexandra and I will just give another minute or so for everyone to get in and then we will start on today's topic. Welcome if you've joined us. Just a couple more seconds for the people to come through the door and we'll begin. So, hello and welcome to today's Insight session. I'm Rachel Reed, Director of Insight here at ETOA, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Alexander Goranson of Euromonitor. Hello, Alexander.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to be here again.
Excellent. We're looking forward to what you have to say today on targeting luxury-seeking travellers. So, this is often viewed as a very desirable segment to attract because obviously there's the high spend and that side of things. But increasingly, their interest and ability to participate in sustainable tourism is also very attractive for destinations now. So we're looking forward to hearing more about that in a moment. And I'm also interested, Alexander, that you've got some quite surprising revelations around, which are the key markets and which ones have the most potential for tourism to Europe. So yeah, looking forward to hearing about that as well. So just before we do, a little bit of housekeeping. We will make the presentation available to you afterwards. So we'll send it out to you and it will also be on our Insight Hub. So that will happen tomorrow. And if you do have questions, please type them in to the Q&A and we should hopefully have some time to cover those after Alexander's presentation. So with that, I will hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the subject of today's webinar is going to be targeting luxury-seeking travellers. And what I'll be walking you through today is first we need to define exactly who Euromonitor see as a luxury-seeking traveller. I've identified there's a lot of potential for inbound luxury travellers to Europe from sort of Eastern markets, Middle East and Asia. We'll then look a bit more, go into more depth on who the luxury seekers are and more importantly, what they are seeking in a destination, and then round off with some key takeaways. And I've also identified 4 markets with potential. So firstly, about Euromonitor, briefly, who I represent. So we're a global business intelligence agency. We've been going now for just over 50 years, and I've been with the company for just over 20, where I'm now a senior consultant focusing on travel. And we've got 16 offices worldwide. We're headquartered in London. We cover a comprehensive range of industries. I myself, as I mentioned, focus on travel, but actually in many ways, a lot of these industries cross over because, for example, a hotel might be using tissue, which we track, or travellers would be using consumer food services. I think they all complement each other. But first, I think the key thing we need to look at before we go too deep on luxury travellers is to actually define what Euromonitor sees as a luxury traveller. And we commission an extensive series of surveys. It's around about 40 respondents globally in almost as many countries. And Euromonitor have identified 8 different traveller types. You can see them on screen now. As you can imagine, the most common traveller type is going to be the leisure seeker, followed by the luxury explorer, the cultural explorer. But today we're going to look more closely at the luxury seeker and luxury seeking travelers. So how do we define them? So what we did was that in our surveys, we put the respondents a number of questions which they have to answer if they agree or disagree to, and then we match those answers up to individual traveller types. So for luxury seekers, we are going by consumers who've responded to that they agree that it's important that other people think they're doing well financially. They have taken at least 2 international leisure trips in the past 12 months, and they've replied affirmatively to one or both of that they agree that it's important to spend money on experiences, or say that they would rather buy fewer but better quality things. And in terms of where the likely source markets are going to be for luxury travelers, uh, what I did when I reviewed now our survey data to see where the luxury travelers come from, and also overlaid that with if they're traveling to Europe, is I actually found that the Eastern markets perhaps have the biggest promise and the most potential for luxury inbound travel to Europe. So with this slide, I have pulled up all of the non-European markets where you have more than, what should we say, global on a global average, we have found that 9% of respondents would be defined as luxury seekers. And in this slide, I have pulled up all countries which are above the global average, except one which is the Netherlands, because that was actually the only European country that made it into the list. But I've excluded European countries because I know the focus for ETOA is going to be inbound travel to Europe. But as you can see here in the bar chart, Singapore has the highest proportion of travellers we've identified as luxury. But again, it's a relatively small source market. At the same time, we've got the UAE and Saudi Arabia come up very high as well. However, then there's China. China is obviously a huge focus market for inbound travel. We're seeing it recover very quickly at the moment. However, I'm going to be a bit pedantic with China. So for simplification, it says 9% of respondents. Actually, China comes in at 8.6, which means that it actually falls just below the global average. Well, another one which surprised me, the largest inbound market to Europe is the US, and there actually the penetration of luxury seeking travelers is just 6%, so well below the global average. And another market which really stands out, which is, classic inbound market to Europe, it comes in very low in terms of the luxury seeking presentation, is Japan, where just 1% of Japanese travelers are defined as luxury seekers. Now, the question as well to ponder is, are these people actually coming to Europe? So what I did was I've stripped out all the countries which are in the leading source markets with a high luxury seeking penetration. And I'm just showing now the ones which are within the top 10 inbound arrivals to Europe. And you can see actually most of them go the UAE, Saudi Arabia, India, Australia, and Turkey remain. So that might be a question here, these markets which have high penetrations of luxury seeking travelers but are not actually coming to Europe. In some cases, it's due to low population, in others, it's preference. So, what can be done given there is a luxury potential there to interest them in coming to Europe? To give a bigger context, I am now just showing actually the leading inbound markets to Europe. I'm going to just have to make a clarification here. When putting together this presentation, I purely looked at Western European countries, and I will be referring to them as Europe. I did that for, I think, well, convenience, but also because the overwhelming majority of tourism into Europe is to Western Europe. But as we can see, the blue bars here show the inbound tourism spending growth between 2025 and 2030. So yes, for example, the US is going to grow by far more than, comparable countries, but its actual luxury penetration is a lot lower here, down to 6%. China, meanwhile, is also going to grow very strongly, but as we saw in the earlier slide, its luxury penetration is average. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if we look at India, India is very much a focus market now. It's growing very rapidly. It's going to be the third fastest growing in value terms inbound market to Europe. But as you can see, the orange kind of line here, which indicates the proportion of tourists which are luxury seekers, that is actually now much higher than the growth bar. So we're going to have, India is going to be growing very quickly, but also has a much higher penetration of luxury seekers than, for example, the US and China. And I will, at the end, towards the end of this deck, actually show, I've singled out four markets which I think have the most potential for luxury seeking travelers into Europe. So, who are the luxury seekers and what are their attributes? So at a global level now, we've ranked the travellers who define themselves as luxury seekers in our surveys by age. And one thing that's very clear here is that there's a gravitation towards a more younger demographic. The highest bar here, 40% of luxury seekers are in the 30 to 44 age gap, followed by the 15 to 29, and it really sort of tapers down the older you get. I think this might be a bit counterintuitive from a European, especially perhaps British perspective, where a lot of wealth is tied up with more older demographics and baby boomers. I think I should also point out that perhaps the skew here towards a younger demographic is we've got a lot more luxury seekers from emerging markets in Asian countries, where again, emerging countries and wealth goes towards a younger consumer base. But definitely, at a global level, luxury seekers tend to gravitate towards the younger half of the population. Also, a very defining factor of luxury seekers is that they value the human touch in throughout the entire sort of travel journey, both when it comes to booking, but also, per service and destination. And as we'll see actually in a subsequent slide, they're also very social with their travel plans. But even if luxury seekers have a high online penetration, they also still like to go to the store, and they actually come up as the highest in-store penetration for booking travel at 32%. Luxury seekers, in terms of their spending habits, are also very loyal. This is not specifically now for travel, but for any goods and services. But luxury seekers tend to buy more from companies where they have a loyalty card than the sort of global population. And as I mentioned, luxury seekers are very social. So in our surveys, we've identified who are the preferred travel partner. And, for all groups, it's not a surprise it's going to be partners and children's. But for all of the different types here, so partners, children, parents, siblings, and friends, actually, luxury seekers have a higher preference for traveling with company than overall travelers. The big exception, as you can see, so in these charts, the yellow bar is for luxury seekers. The only one where the yellow bar is significantly, or indeed at all, lower than the blue bar, which is overall travelers, is going to be luxury seekers traveling alone. They do not like to travel alone. And from a more financial perspective, luxury seekers are more resilient. That, of course, can be understood because they are high net worth individuals. But for example, if we take the second bar from the top, we have surveyed now, do they plan to change their spending habits? Are they going to increase their spending or decrease them? And in the second bar from the top, we've got travel and holidays, where again, you can see luxury seekers do have plans to increase. It's about 35% compared to just under 20% for the population as a whole. Wellness is again very related to luxury travel, so spas, etc. which is again a pursuit that they might want to pursue when in destination. Again, we've got here 40% say they plan to increase their spending on wellness, compared to sort of in the region of just 10% for the global population. On the other hand, luxury spending on from luxury seekers on travel does have competition, because the luxury seekers are also saying, and again, much more than the overall population, that they want to increase their spending on savings as well. So, what do luxury seekers seek from a destination? And to this end, I spoke to, because I've got colleagues who cover the Middle East, have in India and also in Hong Kong. So, effectively, and it should be said that this are common themes for all travelers, but it's even more so within the luxury segment. But really, various permutations from all of these markets. And again, I mean, these are the markets where the bulk of the inbound to Europe luxury travel opportunities come from. Coming up constantly are nature, heritage, shopping, and then also immersion in the destination. So I think here the recommendation would be to try and put together an offering where people can go and see nature, historical sites, but also go to a big city or a shopping village to sort of arrange for the shopping. It also gives perhaps the opportunity to direct travellers away from more sort of over touristy hotspots as well. But by immersion, which we'll look a bit more at in a subsequent slide, it is a case of experiencing the destination, experiencing the culture, and experiencing the heritage, but also looping back to shopping to, for example, experience more local shops, bazaars, and authentic local products. And what we are finding as well, and perhaps a growing macro trend within travel, is that people want to use their holidays and their travel to indulge in their different interests and hobbies. And this was a lot of talk this time last year about Swiftonomics with Taylor Swift. So to go and to see, concerts, favorite bands, but also go and see sporting events. And indeed, within the overall package holiday space last year, we identified the sort of special interest package as being the fastest growing package holiday type. But again, it's not just a case of going somewhere, having a good time, indulging yourself shopping. It's also a feeling that travelers increasingly want to make a positive impact on the destination economy and the sustainability. So to spend money with local businesses and local shops, which again ties into the whole immersion thing. And as I always say as well, it's easier to be generous if you have a high disposable income. So here's a group who can go and do that. And again, just to amplify now that luxury seekers are willing to spend more. So same structure as previously in the bar chart. We got luxury seekers in orange. So again, we've surveyed now in all our surveys how many people would be willing to spend 30% plus on a particular type of travel product. And we've got here, you can see at the top here, group tours and activities. Luxury seekers, we're looking here at over 50% compared to 40% for the overall population. Nature and outdoor is again something they are willing to spend a lot more on than the general public. And indeed, which I've not gone down this route so much for this presentation, but yes, all-inclusive resorts are again very popular amongst luxury travelers. But one thing that did surprise me when I pulled this together was that no flight travel comes up very high as well for luxury seekers. And actually, well, again, we're talking probably about 55% would pay 30% or more not to fly, whereas that's less than 40% amongst the overall population. And I thought of this as well from ETOA members' perspective because you're inbound to Europe and a lot of the source markets for the luxury travel are going to come quite a long way away from Asia, which would mean that surface travel is not, I would say, particularly feasible. It's going to take half your holiday to get there, if that. So the question is really perhaps how to tap into that, and maybe if one could direct people towards no flight travel once they're in the destination Europe. So to round this off with the key takeaways, so I trailed earlier that I would be highlighting four key markets to look out for. And what I did was when I profiled those, that I pulled the 10 largest inbound markets to Western Europe by value today, how much they were going to grow by within the next 5 years, and also look at the penetration of luxury seekers. And four markets came up which sort of were in the top 10 for all those three criteria. Now, China is the perennial sort of opportunity, shall we say, and indeed, China is going to also, in absolute terms, have the fastest value growth in terms of inbound to Western Europe over the next 5 years. We're looking at somewhere in the region of about $7 billion in additional sales. However, if we look at the penetration of luxury seekers, 'cause these growth rates are for overall travel into Western Europe, as we saw earlier on, China comes actually just below the global average in the penetration of luxury seekers. Then we have India. India is a rapidly growing market, the second fastest growing market for inbound to Europe in our forecast. But again, as you can see, in many ways, even if inbound growth from India is going to be less than half of that from China, actually they have a much higher, more than double penetration of luxury seekers. Now, the next two markets that came up were the UAE and the Philippines, which again, they are important markets. They're also growing, and again, they have a very high luxury seeking penetration. Now, I decided not to include the Saudi Arabia in this slide because it's now coming, actually, to be frank, a bit cliched here. They are the kind of four usual suspects: China, India, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. So I decided instead to look at the country that is actually bubbling up, which is the Philippines. Now, the Philippines is below average in terms of, I think it's something like 7% penetration of luxury seekers. On the other hand, after China and India, it's actually the second fastest of these of markets with a above average luxury penetration, which I know, yes, Philippines doesn't have, but I'm being flexible here to say it's the third fastest growing. So therefore, I've put it in next. It's growing faster than the UAE, and so therefore, it might be worth, if you want to sort of think a bit out of the big four and out of the box, to take a look at the Philippines as a market for luxury seeking travelers. But to summarize, so Asia and the Middle East, they have the highest penetration of luxury seeking travelers. The big question is, though, are they actually visiting Europe? And to cater for the luxury seekers, you need to look at that you really need to remember they do value the human touch, and they are more social than the overall population in terms of their travel plans. And that also distinguishes them from, a major market like the US. But also with their travel, they are keen on making a positive impact on the destination, both socially and economically. So that is also an attribute to play to. So I hope you found the presentation interesting today. I'm actually going to be continuing this partnership with ETOA and Euromonitor, and I will be actually back for another presentation at the end of September. I think it's the 23rd, isn't it, Rachel?
Believe so, yeah.
Yeah, good. We'll be sent out an invite in the meantime. And then I will be sharing with you our latest findings. So that most of the data on the number of trips and spending is from our provisional data we are working on at the moment. That we are going to publish to our clients at the end of August. And then on the back of that, I'm going to do a presentation showcasing our latest data, which will be exclusive to ETOA members, similar format to this and the one I did last year. So I look forward to seeing you again at the end of September. But now I understand there's going to be a Q&A.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much, Alexander. Yes, we look forward to seeing you again in September. But before that, let's go back to the luxury seekers.
Yeah.
I think there were some quite interesting aspects that you put out there in that presentation. And I think something that struck me is that there are lots of attractive features of luxury seekers, both for travel businesses, but also for destinations. I think what you were speaking about in terms of them being keen on experiential travel,
Yeah.
I think is quite important for destinations in terms of the problem of over tourism or unbalanced tourism, as people are calling it a bit more now these days, in that a lot of these experiences can tend to be outside of the major hotspots. And I just wondered what you think of the luxury seekers' potential to help out with that problem, actually, from a destination point of view.
I think absolutely, because also, they can afford to leave the crowds, leave the mainstream, and they are looking for unique experiences and also group experiences. And looping back actually to the presentation I did in September, we were looking at somewhere India had a very large penetration of people going to countries around the Alps, for example, which is again more countryside, not big city tourism.
Yes, absolutely. And so do please type in any questions you've got for Alexander in the Q&A. Can I just check, Alexander, have you stopped sharing your screen? Because I
I
think we're
have,
quite
I
little.
have, yeah. Do you want me to pop it back on or?
Well, we just are quite small. I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure we can hear each other, so that's
Well, we can
fine.
have the thank you slide.
But there we are. I don't know why we're so small. But anyway, yes, do please type in any questions and we can cover them. Another thing that struck me though as well was way back at the beginning of your presentation, you said something that was important to the luxury seekers in terms of how Euromonitor defines them is that it's important that people think they're doing well.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether that potentially makes them very good ambassadors for the destinations, because they want to tell people, here I am doing well in this place. And that to me seemed to be a very good lever for ambassadors and kind of word of mouth recommendation, which
I'd
really,
agree with that. And I think there's a lot of following of travel bloggers. And I know when I deal with national tourism boards, they work a lot more with sort of influencers and advertising. And I think actually with any product, the most powerful sort of sales argument is that a friend recommends it to you.
yes, well, absolutely. So, I mean, I thought from a destination point of view, you've got two very good features there, which is the contribution to addressing unbalanced tourism and regional difference, and the word of mouth ambassador. So, I mean, I think that's certainly very good news. Can I ask you though, Alexander? I don't know if you've got any more detail on this, but I was curious when you were showing the sort of penetration of luxury seekers in the source markets. Why is it so low in Japan? I just wondered if there were certain features about that market that made
I'm
it so.
afraid I don't know. I can only speculate, but I've noticed that Japanese people don't tend to indulge in stuff. And I was actually having a random discussion with my colleague in Tokyo about marketing of capsule hotels, for example. And I mean, a capsule hotel is absolutely everything but luxury, I would say. Hmm?
Yes, yeah, I wonder.
I don't really have a good answer to that, but.
No,
But
well, I mean,
on the
conversely
other
as well,
hand,
don't
it
worry.
seems to, I've noticed this whole luxury thing does gravitate away from the whole developed markets. I mean, America is below average as well, although you have a lot of disposable incomes there.
I mean, do you think actually, just thinking of that on the subject of the States, do you think economic uncertainty contributes to some of that as well?
Well, this is a survey that we did in the beginning of this year, and we've been doing it annually, and I've not seen any significant changing in the pattern there.
Mm-hmm. I've got a question here that's coming on the Q&A around um, the destinations in Europe. I know we've spoken about the features that people look for in terms of activities and what they'd like to do and who they'd like to go with. Just somebody wondering if you had any information on specific destinations in Europe. Was that in the survey?
Not in the survey. We're not sort of asked, are you interested in going to Italy or to France or anything?
I think that would be something we would all love to see if you do another one, Alexander.
Yeah. Well,
Where
as I always say with researching travel and speaking to clients, the joke is you can't really go granular enough.
yes,
So luxury seekers from country X, where do they want to go?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then one point that another question that's coming on the Q&A that somebody was asking about is you spoke about the luxury seekers tend to be social in that they don't like to travel alone. And they were just wondering whether there was anything more about FIT, independent travelers versus groups, as in an organized group. We know they'd be happy in a family group, but are they keen on small group travel, for example?
I don't have figures on that, but I would anecdotally imagine yes, actually. And
Yes, although one thing we've certainly seen, I know this would actually be, again, anecdotally from the US luxury market, is that what is popular is group family travel, so extended family. So you would be going as a group that we would consider a group, so maybe 12 to 15 people, but it would be an extended family group as opposed to signing up with other people that you didn't necessarily know.
definitely that is going to be more of a case from Asia and particularly India as well, going as a family.
And well, that lends itself very well as well to the point you highlighted about the personal touch and wanting to have bespoke services from a person.
And I think it also goes in on, I think, culture. If you're looking at the East, Middle East, Asia, people are more family oriented. Uh, in Europe, I mean, we marry later. We have friends on social media. But I'm sounding very depressing now, rather than real life friends. I think there's that sort of demographic social thing as well, which is underlying these trends.
Mm. I mean, one thing as well that that I thought of in terms of the trends that you've highlighted is them being younger. I think that's interesting for, well, both destinations and business, because it gives the potential for a long-standing relationship
Mhm.
with that person. We actually we did a webinar on youth and younger travel a while back, but one of the key things we spoke about was this idea that if you go somewhere when you're relatively young, you do tend to form a sort of emotional relationship with it and go back yourself and then bring your own children back. So I think that's quite interesting, especially given the tendency towards loyalty as well that you spoke about.
Yeah. And I can see as well that you're going to perhaps see it from a different perspective if you go there first as a backpacker, and then maybe you've now become more affluent in life, and then come back with your family and have a new angle on the place again. It's
Yes, absolutely. So do please type in any further questions you've got for Alexander. I don't have any at the moment, but another thing that I thought of, I thought it's very interesting about the no-fly travel.
yeah.
I think that's something that people are more keen to encourage. But as you say, long haul is almost impossible. And the one thing I did wonder about, if people are sort of willing to spend on the no-fly, could they reduce the length of their trip by doing, sort of partial land and then flying the last bit, or there may be that sort of possibility.
You mean one way by flight and going on a cruise ship back or something?
Possibly, or going part of the way by train and then getting your plane from
Well, I
close.
think all of these modes complement each other. I mean, certainly, as I suggested in the presentation, once you're in Europe to go around by train. Then, of course, I do find that train bookings does entail perhaps a bit more of an element of local knowledge than booking a flight, but a travel agency can work that out. I think, of course, the other risk is that somebody living in, let's say, East Asia would instead go somewhere in East Asia where they don't have to go on the plane as well.
Yes, I mean there is that, isn't there? That's true. Got a question coming about booking window. I mean, I know that's probably not necessarily been answered, but I wonder if there was any sort of anecdotal evidence around whether the luxury seekers tend to be early birds or last minute bookers in terms of making these decisions. Are they planners or spur of the
It's a
moment?
very interesting question. I've not actually seen anything on that, so I wouldn't actually know, I'm afraid. Sorry.
I think that would be quite an interesting thing to say. I mean, I
Yeah,
would.
it's definitely a very interesting question, actually.
I suppose sometimes it depends on if you have got a lot of money, you can sometimes arrive later because
On the other hand, if you're after a very specific experience, it sort of would entail planning. And again, I'm also thinking that these luxury trips would gravitate more if this is your big holiday in the year rather than going somewhere for a city break or something.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think in a moment where we will wrap it up, unless anyone else wants to type anything in. Alexandra, it would be good to get some kind of final thoughts from you, I suppose, in terms of the potential for this market or anything we haven't said yet.
I definitely think it's a growing market. As we saw in the slides, all the countries that I've highlighted have all got very strong growth in the number of travellers coming. And also, as we saw, a lot of the leading luxury source markets with a high penetration of luxury seekers, they are not amongst the top 10 coming into Europe. So I would definitely say there's a large penetration. And actually, we shouldn't forget the luxury seekers from the US either. They are still 6% of the US population, which is big. So
Yeah. Oh.
I didn't go down that route so much, mainly because I was more interested to talk about emerging markets.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting aspect. We do actually have just one more question from Cheryl, who has asked about where they tend to source their experiences from, which I think is sort of feeds into the discussion we were just having, in that they quite like to talk about that with a person rather than looking it up just on a travel website, for example.
I think that's correct. As we saw, there's a tendency of booking online. Sorry, offline. I mean, personal touch in a shop.
Yes, so
I
there's.
will say this, and this is not going to be specific for luxury seekers, but I've been doing research into online booking of experiences, and it does appear there that Asia has a very different pattern to the rest of Europe, where it's either direct or the big two are Get Your Guide and Viator, who then also partner with some of the major OTAs. But in Asia, there's a tremendous preference here for things called with these sort of super apps they have, and booking online via intermediaries. But again, that's now for overall travelers, not specifically luxury. So
Yeah.
it's not the usual suspect online players over in Asia.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Fluke is one that's sort of very big.
I'm sorry.
Fluke is one major player over there, which simply is marginal in Europe.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think that may be the end of the questions. So we will finish off there. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Alexander, for
Interesting
putting that
questions as
together.
well. So.
What's that? Sorry?
And interesting questions from you and the audience as well.
There we are. Thank you. So we will send this out to you very soon. We'll also put it on our Insight Hub. Do visit the Insight Hub if you haven't been, etoa.org/insight. So Euromonitor have their own channel on there if you're looking specifically for Euromonitor research, but we do have all kinds of research data and webinars on there. So have a look at that if you haven't. And otherwise, thank you so much, Alexander Goranson of Euromonitor. And we look forward to seeing you on the next session.
Indeed. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.